There is a prison that holds millions of people every single day. It has no walls, no bars, no locked doors, yet countless people spend their entire lives trapped inside it. The strange part is that most never realize they're prisoners, because this prison is built from something invisible. It is built from the opinions of other people. Think about how many decisions you've made simply because you wanted someone else's approval. Maybe you stayed silent when you wanted to speak. Maybe you pretended to enjoy something you secretly disliked. Maybe you chose a career to impress your family instead of following your own purpose. Maybe you posted something online, not because it mattered to you, but because you hoped someone would notice. Little by little, these moments begin to shape an identity that no longer belongs to you. Instead of asking, "What kind of person do I want to become?" you begin asking, "What kind of person will everyone else accept?" That single shift changes everything. Without realizing it, your life slowly becomes a performance. You smile when you're exhausted. You agree when you disagree. You apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. And every time you do, you hand away another small piece of your freedom. The tragedy isn't that other people have opinions. They always will. The tragedy is allowing those opinions to become more important than your own conscience. Marcus Aurelius understood this danger better than most. As the ruler of the Roman Empire, he lived under constant observation. Every decision was judged, every action criticized, every weakness magnified. If anyone had reason to obsess over public approval, it was him. Yet his private writings reveal a completely different focus. He constantly reminded himself that another person's judgment could never determine his character. Only his own actions could do that. Imagine carrying a compass while walking through a dense forest. As long as you trust the compass, you'll eventually find your direction. But what happens if every stranger you meet points in a different direction? One says go north, another says turn west. Someone else insists you're already lost. If you stop trusting your compass and follow every voice you hear, you'll spend your entire life wandering in circles. Your values are that compass. Approval is simply noise. Most people confuse the two. This confusion begins earlier than we realize. As children, approval teaches us how to survive. Parents praise good behavior. Teachers reward good grades. Friends accept us when we fit in. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. Approval helps us learn, but somewhere along the way, many people stop using approval as feedback and start using it as their identity. Instead of thinking, "I made a mistake," they begin believing, "I am a mistake," instead of hearing disagreement. They hear rejection. Instead of hearing criticism, they hear proof that they are not enough. This is where suffering begins, not in the opinion itself, but in the meaning we attach to it. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology continues to confirm. Events themselves rarely disturb us. Our interpretation of those events does. Two people can receive the exact same criticism. One feels devastated, the other feels curious. What made the difference? Not the words, the mind interpreting them. This is why Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things themselves, but by our judgments about them. It is one of the most liberating ideas ever written, because if your judgment creates your suffering, then changing your judgment changes your experience. Imagine standing before a mirror that distorts your reflection. Every day it tells you that you're too small, too weak, too imperfect. Eventually, you stop questioning the mirror. You begin questioning yourself. Approval works much the same way. When your worth depends on other people's opinions, you're looking into hundreds of distorted mirrors every day. Each one reflects a different version of who they think you are. None of them reveal who you truly are. Only your character can do that. The problem is that approval is addictive. Every compliment gives us a brief emotional reward. Every like, every promotion, every word of praise. For a moment, we feel complete, but only for a moment. Soon, the feeling fades. Then we begin chasing the next compliment, the next achievement, the next person who might finally convince us that we are enough. It becomes an endless cycle, like drinking salt water to satisfy your thirst. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. Inner peace can never grow in soil constantly watered by other people's opinions. It grows somewhere entirely different. It grows in quiet moments when you keep your promises to yourself, when you choose integrity even if no one notices, when you continue improving without needing applause, when your actions begin matching your values. That is where confidence is born, not from being admired, but from becoming trustworthy in your own eyes. This is why the Stoics spent so much time looking inward, not because they ignored the world, but because they understood that the quality of your inner world determines how you experience the outer one. A peaceful mind creates a peaceful life. An anxious mind finds anxiety everywhere. Today, more than ever, we are surrounded by opportunities to compare ourselves. Every scroll through social media becomes a comparison. Someone appears richer, healthier, smarter, more successful, more attractive. It creates the illusion that everyone else has already figured life out. But remember this: people share highlights, not struggles; victories, not failures; the polished surface, not the unseen work beneath it. If you compare your entire life to someone else's carefully edited moments, you will always feel like you're losing a race that doesn't actually exist. Marcus Aurelius would have smiled at this modern habit, not because comparison is new, but because human nature has always searched for reasons to feel inadequate. His answer was surprisingly simple: return to yourself again and again. Whenever your attention drifts toward what others have, bring it back to what you can build. Whenever your mind seeks validation, return it to virtue. Whenever your peace depends on another person's approval, bring it home, because the moment you stop asking, "Do they approve of me?" and begin asking, "Am I living according to my values?" everything begins to change, not overnight, but quietly, the way all lasting transformation begins. Because the greatest freedom you'll ever experience is realizing that your worth was never theirs to give, and it was never theirs to take. Why do we care so much about what other people think? Why can one careless comment stay in our minds for days, while 10 sincere compliments disappear almost immediately? Why does rejection hurt so deeply, even when it comes from people we barely know? These questions have fascinated philosophers for centuries and psychologists for decades. The answer lies in a fascinating intersection between human evolution and the way our minds are wired. To understand why approval has such power over us, we have to go back thousands of years. Long before modern cities, careers, or social media existed, our ancestors lived in small tribes. Survival depended on cooperation. Being accepted by the group meant safety, food, protection, and belonging. Being rejected often meant something far more dangerous. It could mean facing the wilderness alone. For our ancestors, social rejection wasn't simply uncomfortable. It was a genuine threat to survival. Because of this, the human brain evolved to pay extraordinary attention to what other people thought. Even today, your brain still carries that ancient survival system. When someone criticizes you, your nervous system often reacts as though you're facing physical danger. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tense, your thoughts race. You replay the conversation again and again, searching for ways you could have changed the outcome. The body cannot always distinguish between being attacked by a predator and being attacked by someone's opinion. This explains why approval feels so emotionally powerful. But here's the problem. The world has changed. Our biology has not. Today, we no longer depend on an entire village for survival. Yet many people still behave as though every stranger's opinion determines their future. They spend hours worrying about comments made by co-workers they'll barely remember in 5 years. They lose sleep over criticism from people who know almost nothing about them. They sacrifice their authenticity to avoid disappointing individuals who aren't living their lives. The Stoics recognized this contradiction long before neuroscience explained it. They understood that most emotional suffering comes not from reality itself, but from the stories we create about reality. Epictetus famously taught that We are disturbed not by events, but by the judgments we attach to those events. Imagine receiving two different messages. The first says, "You're not good enough." The second says, "You still have room to improve." Both messages point toward imperfection, yet one creates shame, the other creates growth. The difference isn't the situation, the difference is interpretation. Your mind is constantly assigning meaning to everything that happens, and those meanings eventually become your emotional reality. This is why two people can experience the exact same failure and walk away completely differently. One says, "This proves I'll never succeed." The other says, "This teaches me what I need to improve." Same event, different judgment, different life. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to examine his judgments before believing them. He understood that emotions often arrive before wisdom. Your first reaction is rarely your best reaction. This simple habit creates enormous freedom. Instead of immediately believing every fearful thought, you begin asking, "Is this actually true? Am I reacting to facts or to my interpretation of the facts?" These questions interrupt the emotional storm before it controls your behavior. Modern psychology offers another fascinating explanation. Researchers have discovered that approval activates the brain's reward system. Every compliment, every expression of admiration, every notification, every message of praise triggers the release of dopamine, a chemical associated with motivation and reward. This is why receiving positive feedback feels so satisfying. There's nothing wrong with enjoying appreciation. The danger begins when appreciation becomes necessary for emotional stability. Imagine someone who only feels valuable after receiving compliments. Their confidence rises and falls with every opinion they encounter. One day they're energized, the next they're discouraged. Not because they changed, but because someone else's opinion changed. This creates emotional dependence, and dependence always weakens freedom. The Stoics sought something entirely different. They wanted a form of confidence that could survive both praise and criticism. A confidence rooted in character rather than reputation. Because reputation belongs to other people, character belongs to you. There is another reason approval becomes so addictive. It often begins in childhood. Many of us learned that love followed achievement. Good grades earned praise. Good behavior earned acceptance. Success earned attention. Failure sometimes brought disappointment. Without realizing it, we began connecting our worth to our performance. As adults, this pattern quietly continues. We chase promotions not only for financial security, but for recognition. We buy certain possessions hoping they'll increase our status. We compare ourselves with others, searching for evidence that we are finally enough. The problem is that enough never arrives through comparison. There will always be someone wealthier, someone smarter, someone stronger, someone more successful, if comparison determines. Your peace becomes impossible. Seneca understood this deeply. He warned that those who constantly measure themselves against others surrender their happiness to circumstances they cannot control. Think of two runners. The first runs because he loves becoming stronger. The second runs only to finish ahead of everyone else, who enjoys the journey more. The first, because his success depends on effort. The second depends on comparison, and comparison never ends. This is why focusing on yourself is so liberating. Your attention returns to something you can actually influence: your habits, your decisions, your discipline, your integrity. Instead of competing against the world, you begin cooperating with your own potential. This shift changes the quality of every day. You stop asking, "How do I look?" and begin asking, "How do I live?" You stop asking, "Do they approve of me?" and begin asking, "Did I act according to my values?" Notice how much calmer those questions feel. They remove anxiety because they return responsibility to where it belongs, inside you. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that another person's opinion was simply another event in the universe, no different from rain, wind, or changing seasons. You don't become angry because it rains, you adapt. Likewise, criticism doesn't have to become a personal attack. It can simply become information, sometimes useful, sometimes completely irrelevant. Either way, it never has the authority to define your identity. One of the greatest signs of emotional maturity is learning to separate feedback from self-worth. You can accept correction without believing you're a failure. You can learn from mistakes without condemning yourself. You can disagree with someone without needing them to approve of you. That is genuine confidence, not believing you're perfect, but knowing your value doesn't disappear when someone fails to recognize it as your dependence. On approval begins to fade, something extraordinary happens. Your mind becomes quieter. You stop rehearsing imaginary conversations. You stop trying to impress people who were never paying close attention in the first place. You stop carrying the exhausting burden of maintaining an image. Instead, you become free to simply live, not for applause, not for validation, but because living with integrity becomes its own reward. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. Of all, the person who needs the least approval often experiences the greatest peace, because their happiness no longer depends on something they were never meant to control. Imagine carrying the weight of an entire empire on your shoulders. Every sunrise brings new problems: a war at the northern frontier, political conspiracies within your own government, economic uncertainty, disease spreading through cities, thousands of lives depending on your decisions. Now imagine trying to lead under those conditions while everyone around you has an opinion about how you should rule. Some praise you, others criticize you, some call you wise, others call you weak, some celebrate your victories, others wait patiently for your failures. This was the reality of Marcus Aurelius. He lived under constant observation. Every action was judged, every decision questioned, every mistake magnified. If anyone had reason to become obsessed with public opinion, it was the Emperor of Rome. Yet the remarkable thing about Marcus Aurelius was not his power, it was his perspective. Instead of spending his life chasing admiration, he spent his life mastering himself. His private journal, known today as Meditations, reveals a man who repeatedly reminded himself of one simple truth: your peace cannot depend on what other people think of you. That sentence sounds simple, but living it requires extraordinary courage, because almost everything around us encourages the opposite from childhood. We're taught to seek approval. We raise our hands to receive praise. We study to earn recognition. We work to impress employers. We dress to fit in. We speak carefully so no one disagrees. Without noticing, we slowly become actors performing on a stage that never closes. Every audience changes, but the performance continues. Marcus Aurelius refused to live that way. He understood something that most people discover far too late. The crowd is impossible to satisfy. Please one person, another becomes disappointed. Win one argument, someone else starts another. Earn one achievement, the world immediately expects the next. Approval has no finish line. It simply keeps moving farther away. This is why chasing approval eventually becomes exhausting. You spend years trying to reach a destination that doesn't actually exist. Marcus asked himself a different question. Instead of asking, "Do they admire me?" he asked, "Did I act with wisdom today?" Notice how different those questions are. The first depends on other people. The second depends entirely on you. That single shift transforms your life. Because every evening, regardless of what happened, you can answer it honestly. Did I remain patient? Did I tell the truth? Did I control my anger? Did I fulfill my responsibilities? Those are questions no critic can answer for you. Only your conscience can. The Stoics believed that your conscience should become your greatest judge, not because it is harsh, but because it is honest. Imagine standing before two mirrors. The first mirror reflects whatever other people think. One day you look successful. The next day you appear insignificant. Its image changes constantly because people's opinions constantly change. The second mirror reflects only your character. It asks no questions about fame, no questions about popularity, only one question. Did you live according to your values today? Which mirror would you trust? Most people spend their lives staring into the first. Marcus Aurelius chose the second, and because of that, his peace became remarkably stable. This didn't mean he ignored criticism. The Stoics never encouraged arrogance. They welcomed constructive feedback because it helped them improve. But they made an important distinction. There is a difference between learning from criticism and living for criticism. The first creates growth. The second creates anxiety. Imagine a sailor crossing the ocean. The wind constantly changes direction. If he becomes angry every time the wind shifts, he'll never reach his destination. Instead, he adjusts his sails. He accepts what he cannot control. Then he focuses on what he can. Life works the same way. Other people's opinions are like the wind, sometimes favorable, sometimes hostile, always changing. Your responsibility is not to control the wind. Your responsibility is to steer your ship. Marcus understood this deeply. That is why he rarely wasted emotional energy trying to control how people perceived him. He invested that energy somewhere far more valuable, his own character. This is one of the greatest differences between modern culture and Stoic philosophy. Modern culture asks, how do people see me? Stoicism asks, who am I becoming? One question produces insecurity, the other produces growth. Because becoming is entirely within your control, there is another lesson Marcus teaches that is especially important today. He frequently reminded himself of how temporary everything is: praise, criticism, success, failure, popularity, even life itself. He observed that the people praising you today may be gone tomorrow. The people criticizing you today will also disappear. Generations pass. Names fade. Empires rise and fall. Knowing this, why surrender your peace to something so temporary? Think about someone who criticized you 5 years ago. Can you remember every word they said? Probably not. Yet at the time, those words may have felt overwhelming. This is the illusion of approval. It feels permanent, but it rarely is. Time quietly dissolves most opinions. The only thing that truly remains is the person you become while living through them. Marcus often reflected on nature to strengthen this perspective. He watched rivers continue flowing without asking permission. Trees continued growing without applause. The sun rose each morning without waiting for recognition. Nature performs its greatest work in silence. It fulfills its purpose without seeking validation. Human beings are part of that same nature, yet we often behave as though every action requires an audience. The Stoics invite us back to simplicity. Work because the work matters. Be kind because kindness reflects your character. Learn because wisdom improves your life, not because someone else is watching. This philosophy becomes incredibly powerful during failure. Suppose you begin a new project. You work hard. You remain disciplined. Despite your efforts, the project fails. If your identity depends on success, failure destroys your confidence. But if your identity depends on virtue, nothing essential has been lost. You still practiced discipline. You still acted with courage. You still remain faithful to your values. The outcome may disappoint you, but it cannot define you. This way of thinking creates remarkable resilience. Instead of fearing failure, you begin respecting effort. Instead of chasing admiration, you begin pursuing excellence. Instead of asking, will people approve? You ask, is this the right thing to do? That question has guided wise people for centuries, not because it guarantees an easy life, but because it guarantees an honest one. And honesty with yourself creates something approval never can: inner peace. Because peace does not arrive when everyone agrees with you. Peace arrives when you no longer need everyone to agree. Slowly, almost without noticing, your priorities begin changing. You stop measuring success by applause. You measure it by integrity. You stop counting followers. You count promises you've kept to yourself. You stop worrying about appearing impressive. You become committed to becoming admirable. That transformation is invisible to most people, but it changes everything. You walk differently. You speak differently. You think differently. Not because you're trying to seem confident, but because confidence has quietly become part of who you are. And perhaps that is Marcus Aurelius' greatest lesson. The strongest person is not the one who wins the admiration of the crowd. The strongest person is the one who no longer needs it. Imagine spending your entire life building a house. You carefully choose every brick, you paint every wall, you arrange every room. But instead of designing it for the life you want to live, you build it according to the preferences of strangers. One person wants larger windows, another prefers a different color, someone else thinks the kitchen belongs somewhere else. Year after year, you keep remodeling your home to satisfy everyone who walks through the door. Eventually, something strange happens. The house no longer feels like home. Many people live their lives exactly this way, not according to their values, not according to their purpose, but according to the expectations of everyone. Around them, they become experts at pleasing others, yet complete strangers to themselves. This is the hidden cost of chasing approval. It doesn't just steal your confidence, it slowly steals your identity. The danger is that this transformation happens quietly. No dramatic moment announces it. There is no warning, only countless small decisions. You say yes when your heart says no. You remain silent when truth asks you to speak. You hide your interests because they seem unpopular. You postpone your dreams because someone doubts them. Individually, these moments seem insignificant. Together, they create a life that feels increasingly disconnected from who you really are. The Stoics believed that every action either strengthens or weakens your character. Each compromise leaves a mark. Not because compromise is always wrong, but because repeated compromises against your own conscience slowly teach your mind a dangerous lesson, that your voice matters less than everyone else's. Imagine carrying a backpack. At first, it's empty. Then someone hands you their expectations. You place them inside. Another person adds their opinions. Then another adds their criticism. Soon your backpack becomes unbearably heavy. Yet instead of putting it down, you convince yourself that carrying it is simply part of life. The truth is, much of that weight was never yours to carry. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every person sees the world through the lens of their own experiences. Their praise reflects them, their criticism reflects them, their expectations reflect them. When someone misunderstands you, they are often responding not to who you truly are, but to the version of you created inside their own mind. Think about that carefully. Every person carries a different image of you. To one person, you're confident. To another, you're quiet. To someone else, you're ambitious. Another sees you as reserved. Which one is the real you? None of them. They are simply interpretations. If you spend your life trying to satisfy every interpretation, you lose touch with reality, because reality exists inside your actions, not inside someone else's imagination. Modern psychology offers an interesting explanation for this. Researchers describe something known as self-concept clarity. People with strong self-concept clarity have a stable understanding of who they are. Their values remain consistent even when circumstances change. People with low self-concept clarity often define themselves through external feedback. As opinions change, their identity changes. As approval disappears, so does their confidence. This explains why approval-seeking creates emotional instability. You become like a ship without an anchor. Every opinion becomes another wave pushing you in a different direction. Some days you feel worthy, other days you feel completely lost. Nothing about you actually changed, only the opinions surrounding you. The Stoics sought to become the anchor, not the ship. Anchors don't stop storms. They prevent you from drifting away during them. That is exactly what strong values accomplish. They keep you grounded while the world changes around you. One of the greatest costs of approval seeking appears in relationships. Many people believe love means becoming whatever another person wants, so they hide parts of themselves. They suppress honest opinions. They pretend to agree. They avoid difficult conversations. At first, this creates temporary harmony, but eventually something begins to crack, Because genuine relationships cannot be built upon carefully managed performances. They require authenticity. Imagine becoming friends with someone who admires a version of you that doesn't actually exist. How long can you continue pretending? Eventually, exhaustion replaces connection, not because the relationship failed, but because honesty never had room to grow. Seneca warned that the person who becomes a servant to public opinion loses the ability to live freely. Freedom begins where pretending ends. This lesson extends beyond relationships. It shapes careers, dreams, ambitions. How many artists stopped creating because someone laughed at their work? How many entrepreneurs abandoned brilliant ideas because relatives doubted them? How many talented people chose ordinary lives simply to avoid criticism? History quietly reminds us that nearly every extraordinary achievement was questioned before it was admired. People mocked innovators, rejected philosophers, doubted explorers, criticized inventors. If every great mind had waited for universal approval, progress would have stopped centuries ago. The Stoics understood that. Criticism often accompanies meaningful action. Not because meaningful action is wrong, but because anything different challenges familiar thinking. There is an old story about a sculptor carving marble. Day after day, people walked past him. Some laughed, some questioned his work. Others claimed he was wasting his time. The sculptor never argued. He never defended himself. He simply continued carving. Months later, the same people gathered to admire the finished masterpiece. What changed? Not the sculptor, not his dedication, only the visibility of his work. The lesson is profound. People often judge the process before they understand the result. If you seek approval during the early stages of growth, you'll probably become discouraged. Growth is almost always misunderstood before it becomes respected. That is why silence protects progress. You don't need everyone to believe in your vision. You only need enough discipline to continue building it. There is another hidden cost to chasing approval. It steals your ability to enjoy the present. Consider how often people experience beautiful moments through someone else's eyes. Instead of watching the sunset, they wonder whether it's worth posting. Instead of enjoying a conversation, they think about how they appeared. Instead of pursuing meaningful work, they worry about how success will be perceived. Life slowly becomes observation instead of participation. The Stoics encouraged the opposite. Be fully present, do today's work, speak honestly, act justly. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow. Inner peace cannot exist while your attention constantly lives inside someone else's opinion. Peace requires presence. Presence requires letting go. Perhaps this is why the quietest people often seem the calmest. They are no longer carrying everyone else's expectations. Their energy returns to where it belongs, their own life. Slowly, almost without noticing, they begin making different decisions. They choose purpose over popularity, truth over comfort, growth over applause, character over reputation. At first, the world may not understand. Some people may even criticize the change, but something remarkable happens when you stop living for approval. The people who truly matter begin respecting you more. Not because you became louder, but because you became real. Authenticity has a quiet strength that performance can never imitate. You no longer need to remember which version of yourself you showed to each person. You simply become consistent. That consistency creates trust. Trust creates peace, and peace creates freedom. Because the greatest prison was never built by other people. It was built by the belief that your worth depended on their approval. The moment you stop believing that, the prison door quietly opens, and for the first time in a very long time, you begin walking toward a life that truly belongs to you. Understanding why we chase approval is important. Recognizing its hidden cost is even more important. But neither of those things will change your life unless they become action. The Stoics never treated philosophy as something to admire from a distance. To them, philosophy was training. Every sunrise offered another opportunity to strengthen the mind. Every difficult conversation became another chance to practice patience. Every criticism became another lesson in emotional discipline. They believed wisdom was not measured by how much you knew, it was measured by how differently you lived. If you truly want to stop chasing approval and find inner peace, your life must begin changing. Through small, consistent habits. Not dramatic transformations, not overnight success, but quiet improvements repeated every single day. Here are 7 Stoic habits that can gradually free your mind from the need for constant validation. Habit 1. Begin each morning with your own standards. Most people begin their day by opening their phone before they've even spoken a word. They're already reading someone else's opinions. News headlines, messages, comments, social media. Without realizing it, they allow the outside world to shape their emotional state before they've even had a chance to shape it themselves. Marcus Aurelius chose a different beginning. He reminded himself each morning of the kind of man he wanted to become, not the kind of reputation. He wanted the kind of character he wanted. Imagine asking yourself every morning, today, how can I be more patient? How can I be more honest? How can I remain calm under pressure? Those questions quietly train your mind to look inward rather than outward. The day no longer begins with comparison. It begins with intention. Habit 2. Keep your greatest goals quiet. There is something tempting about announcing new ambitions. You decide to exercise. You tell everyone. You start reading books. You post about it. You begin building a business. You explain your entire plan before you've taken the first meaningful step. But the Stoics understood something profound. The energy used to impress others is energy no longer available for the work itself. Imagine planting a seed. Would you dig it up every day just to prove it's growing? Of course not. You water it, protect it, trust the process. Your goals deserve the same patience. Not every dream needs an audience. Sometimes silence is what allows growth to happen. Let your results introduce your efforts, not your announcements. Habit 3. Pause before every emotional reaction. This may be the most practical Stoic habit of all. Between what happens and how you respond, there is always a choice. Someone criticizes you, pause. Someone misunderstands your intentions, pause. Someone tries to provoke you, pause. That brief moment of silence may only last a few seconds, yet it is where freedom lives. Most people believe emotions control their behavior. The Stoics believed disciplined thinking could guide emotions instead. Ask yourself, is reacting immediately helping me? Will this matter a month from now? Am I protecting my peace or my ego? These simple questions prevent countless unnecessary arguments, and every unnecessary argument avoided becomes another victory over yourself. Habit 4. Practice daily solitude. Modern life leaves very little room for silence. There is always another notification, another video, another conversation, another distraction. Many people fear being alone because silence forces them to meet themselves. The Stoics welcomed those moments. They believed solitude revealed the condition of the soul. Spend 10 or 15 minutes every day without external stimulation. No music, no scrolling, no television. Simply sit quietly. Observe your thoughts without judging them. You may discover worries you didn't realize you were carrying, old fears, unfinished conversations, hidden insecurities. Don't fight them. Simply observe. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. Inner peace grows where honest self-reflection begins. Habit 5. Measure yourself against yesterday. Comparison is endless. No matter how successful you become, someone will always appear further ahead, more accomplished, more admired, more experienced. If your happiness depends on being better than everyone else, you'll never rest. The Stoics chose a much healthier comparison. Yesterday's self. Ask yourself each evening, did I become a little wiser today? Did I control my emotions better? Did I keep my word? These small improvements may seem insignificant, but compounded over months and years, they completely transform a person's character. Mountains are climbed one step at a time. Inner peace is built the same way. Habit 6. let actions become your reputation. One of the clearest signs that you've stopped chasing approval is that you stop explaining yourself so often. Instead of talking about discipline, you become disciplined. Instead of telling people you'll change, you quietly change. Instead of convincing others you're capable, you simply continue improving. Imagine two craftsmen. One constantly tells people how skilled he is. The other says very little, but every piece of work he creates reflects extraordinary care. Which craftsman earns lasting respect? The second, because excellence speaks a language louder than self-promotion ever could. Your life should become your introduction, not your words. Habit 7. End every day with honest reflection. Before sleeping, Seneca practiced a simple but powerful ritual. He reviewed the day, not to criticize himself, not to dwell on mistakes, but to learn. He asked questions like, where did I lose patience? Where did I act wisely? How can tomorrow be better? Imagine doing this every night for 1 year, 365 opportunities to refine your character, 365 chances to become calmer, kinder, stronger, more disciplined. Transformation rarely happens through dramatic breakthroughs. It happens through quiet corrections repeated consistently. As these habits become part of your daily life, something remarkable begins to happen. The opinions that once controlled you begin losing their power, not because people stop judging. People always will, not because criticism disappears. It never completely does. But because your identity slowly moves inward. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. Your peace no longer depends on agreement. Your happiness no longer depends on recognition. Instead, it grows from something much more stable: integrity, discipline, self-respect. There will still be difficult days. There will still be moments when old habits return. Moments when you catch yourself wondering what others think. That doesn't mean you've failed. It simply means you're human. The Stoics never expected perfection. They expected practice. Every day offers another opportunity to return to yourself, to remember what truly matters, to choose wisdom over impulse, character over popularity, purpose over performance, one quiet decision at a time, one thoughtful response at a time, one honest action at a time. Eventually, you'll notice something that once seemed impossible. You'll walk into a room without needing anyone's approval. You'll make decisions based on your values instead of your fears. You'll accept criticism without allowing it to define you. You'll celebrate success without becoming dependent upon praise. And perhaps most importantly, you'll discover that the peace you spent years searching for in other people was quietly waiting inside you all along. There comes a day when something inside you quietly changes. Nothing dramatic happens. The world continues moving as it always has. People still have opinions. Some still praise you. Others still criticize you. Social media continues demanding your attention. The noise never truly disappears. But for the first time, you no longer feel compelled to answer every voice. You no longer feel responsible for changing every opinion. You no longer carry the exhausting burden of making everyone happy. Instead, you breathe, and in that simple breath, you discover something priceless: peace. Not the kind of peace that comes because life has become perfect, but the kind that comes because you've stopped fighting battles that were never yours to fight. This is the freedom the Stoics spent their lives pursuing. Not freedom from hardship, not freedom from criticism, but freedom from emotional slavery. Marcus Aurelius understood something that many people spend their entire lives trying to learn. No one can truly imprison your mind unless you hand them the key. Every time you allow someone else's opinion to determine your happiness, you quietly surrender that key. Every time you believe your worth depends on applause, you place your peace into hands that were never meant to hold it. The problem with approval is not that it feels good. It does. The problem is that it cannot last. Today's admiration becomes tomorrow's expectation. Today's success becomes tomorrow's standard. The crowd that celebrates you today may criticize you tomorrow for the very same qualities they once admired. If your happiness depends upon changing opinions, your happiness will always remain uncertain. That is why Stoicism teaches us to build our lives on something far more stable: character, integrity, wisdom, discipline. These qualities cannot be taken away by criticism. They cannot be destroyed by rejection. They cannot disappear because someone chooses not to understand you. They belong entirely to you. Imagine two houses standing beside one another. The first is built upon soft sand. It looks beautiful. People admire it. But when the storm arrives, the foundation begins to collapse. The second house is built upon solid stone. Perhaps it attracts less attention. Perhaps fewer people notice it. But when the same storm arrives, it remains standing. Approval is sand. Character is stone. One depends upon circumstances. The other survives them. Life eventually gives every person a choice. Will you build your identity upon applause or upon principles? One disappears with the crowd. The other remains even when you're completely alone. Think about the people you admire most. Perhaps it's a teacher who quietly changed lives without asking for recognition. A parent who sacrificed comfort so their children could have better opportunities. A mentor who remained honest even when dishonesty would have been easier. A friend who stayed loyal when everyone else walked away. Were these people great because everyone approved of them, or because they lived according to values that never changed? True admiration has never been created by popularity. It has always been created by consistency, consistency of character, consistency of courage, consistency of integrity. The Stoics believed that every human being possesses two lives. The first is the life everyone else sees: your appearance, your achievements, your reputation. The second is invisible. It is the conversation you have with yourself, the promises you keep, the values you refuse to abandon, the quiet decisions made when nobody is watching. Most people spend nearly all their energy improving the first life. Very few invest deeply in the second. Yet the second life determines the quality of the first. A peaceful mind creates peaceful actions. A disciplined mind creates disciplined habits. An honest mind creates honest relationships. Everything begins within. This is why Marcus Aurelius constantly returned to self-examination. Not because he doubted himself, but because he understood that leadership begins with self-leadership before leading an empire. Lead your thoughts before changing the world. Master your reactions before asking others to respect you. Become someone worthy of your own respect. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of Stoicism. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become fully yourself, not the version created by expectations, not the version shaped by comparison, not the version designed to impress strangers. The real you, the one guided by conscience instead of applause, the one who chooses kindness even when no one notices, the one who continues working even when success feels far away, the one who keeps promises made in private. That person is already within you. Approval has simply been drowning out their voice. The moment you stop chasing validation, you finally begin hearing yourself again. And what you hear is surprisingly calm. You realize you don't need permission to pursue meaningful work. You don't need unanimous agreement before making difficult decisions. You don't need every person to understand your journey. Some paths were never meant to be crowded. Some dreams were never meant to be explained. Some victories are too personal to be measured by public applause. There is a quiet confidence that grows only after you've stopped trying to prove yourself. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek attention. It simply exists, like the mountains that remain unmoved by changing weather. Like the ocean that continues flowing regardless of who stands on the shore. Nature never asks for approval. It simply fulfills its purpose. The Stoics believed we should do the same. Live honestly, work diligently, speak thoughtfully, love deeply, help others where you can, accept what you cannot control, improve what you can, and then let go. Because life becomes astonishingly lighter when you stop carrying expectations that never belonged to you. Imagine waking tomorrow morning with one decision already made. You will no longer measure your value by someone else's opinion. You will no longer postpone your happiness until everyone approves. You will no longer explain every choice to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you'll spend that energy becoming wiser, calmer, stronger, more disciplined, more compassionate. Not because someone else expects it, because that is the person you choose to become. Years from now, people may remember your achievements, or they may not. They may remember your name, or they may forget it. Time has a way of carrying everything forward. But one thing will always remain with you, the person you became while living your life. That is your greatest legacy. Not the applause you collected, but the character you built. Not the approval you received, but the peace you protected. Not the image you presented, but the integrity you practiced. So, as you leave this video, remember this simple truth. The world will always have opinions. You do not have to carry them. Focus on your values. Guard your peace. Do your work with quiet excellence. Walk your path with patience. And trust that a life built upon character will always outlast a life built upon approval. Because in the end, inner peace is not something the world gives you. It is something you stop allowing the world to take away. If this message resonated with you, don't let it remain only an idea. Choose one habit from this video and practice it every day for the next 7 days. You don't need a perfect beginning. You only need a consistent one, because lasting transformation is never built through one powerful moment. It is built through hundreds of quiet decisions that no one else sees. If you're committed to mastering your mind, strengthening your character, and living with timeless Stoic wisdom, subscribe to Silent Stoic and join a community dedicated to discipline, resilience, and inner peace. Until the next video, protect your peace, live with integrity, and remember, the moment you stop chasing approval is the moment you begin living for yourself.